The transatlantic slave trade had a devastating impact on African societies. From the 16th to the 19th century, millions of Africans were forcibly taken from their homes and sold into slavery in the Americas. This trade not only led to loss of population and culture, but also disrupted the fabric of African society, altering its political, economic, and social structures. One of the most significant ways in which the transatlantic slave trade impacted African societies was through the loss of population. It is estimated that between 10 and 15 million Africans were taken from their homes in West and Central Africa and transported across the Atlantic. This mass trafficking of people had a ripple effect on the continent, with many communities losing a large proportion of their working-age population, resulting in serious economic and social consequences. The slave trade also disrupted the political structures of African societies. Many African societies were organized into kingdoms and empires, with a hierarchical system of governance. However, the slave trade led to the destabilization of these societies. The demand for slaves led to conflicts between neighboring communities as they sought to capture and sell their enemies into slavery. These conflicts often weakened local institutions of governance and led to an increase in stateless societies. The slave trade also contributed to the rise of new political actors, like military elites, who emerged as intermediaries in the trade and used their newfound wealth to challenge traditional political structures. The economic impact of the slave trade was perhaps the most significant. Africa was not only the starting point of the slave trade, but it was also a major supplier of raw materials, like gold and ivory, used to purchase slaves from African traders. The demand for slaves resulted in the growth of a new industry that was geared towards producing and trading in slaves. The slave trade also diverted human resources and investment away from other sectors of the economy, like agriculture, leading to a decline in food production and economic growth. It had a profound impact on the development of African societies and contributed to their underdevelopment. The social impact of the slave trade was perhaps the most significant. The slave trade not only led to the separation of families but also to the breakdown of social structures. The social fabric of African societies was disrupted as people were torn away from their homes, and communities were uprooted. The slave trade also led to the loss of cultural heritage, as many slaves were stripped of their traditional beliefs, customs, and practices. In the Americas, many Africans were forced to adopt the language, religion, and culture of their slave masters, further distancing them from their African identities. The impact of the transatlantic slave trade on African societies was not limited to the period of the slave trade itself. Even after the abolition of slavery in the Americas, African societies continued to be affected by its legacy. The slave trade had created a new social hierarchy in many African societies, with some communities, like the Akan of Ghana, benefiting from their involvement in the trade. However, this new hierarchy was based on wealth and power rather than social status, and it continued to shape African society long after the abolition of slavery. Additionally, many African societies were left with a legacy of trauma and psychological scars caused by the intergenerational trauma inflicted by the slave trade. In conclusion, the transatlantic slave trade had a profound impact on African societies. It was a period of disruption, loss, and traumatic experiences that shaped the continent's history, and its legacy continues to shape African societies today. The slave trade led to the loss of population, the breakdown of social structures, the destabilization of political institutions, and the diversion of resources away from other sectors of the economy, contributing to the underdevelopment of African societies. Despite the traumatic experiences, however, many African societies have shown remarkable resilience and have found ways to rebuild, and their unique cultures thrive today, despite the attempts of the slave trade to strip them of their heritage. It is important to recognize the impact of the slave trade, to acknowledge the trauma and loss it caused, and to work towards a better future for all Africans.